Now we're going to get into some of the more complicated stuff. What we're going to do now is construct the first of two models of the economy as a whole, okay? This is chapter 10, okay? They used to have chapter 10 and 11. No, we're not doing 9. Can't do everything. So I'd like to do 9, economic growth. It's kind of interesting, but we can't, so we're doing this, okay? Now, what was I starting to say? We're going to construct two models of the economy. We're going to look at what's called the classical model, okay? And the classical model had its origins in the 1770s, and it was true up until about 1910, 1920. And then we're going to look at a modern model, the Keynesian model, okay, of the economy. And I think I mentioned to you guys that the classical model and Keynes model are completely the opposite. If the classical economist said up, Keynes said down. If they said left, he said right, okay? But what we're doing initially is moving from our microeconomic model, okay, of supply and demand for a single good, okay, to a macroeconomic model for the entire economy. But it's based on the same principles, okay? Remember, when we had a particular good, we measured price here, okay, relative price, and over here we measured quantity. But when we're bundling all goods together into one big basket, okay, we really can't talk about the price of a good anymore. But what we can talk about, what we can write to, is the price level, okay, a measurement of inflation. It's going to be, in fact, our index. It is, in fact, the GDP deflator, okay? So if this is our base year, our price level is going to be 100, okay? Remember, base year prices are always 100% of base year prices. And then we add the rate of inflation to get the index for the next year. So if this is 2012, if in 2013 we see a price rise on average inflation of 10%, then the price level will now be up here at 110, okay? We can't count things anymore, okay? We can't go out and count things in terms of quantities anymore. It doesn't make sense when we're talking about GDP. It's like I said, some things we don't make this year that we made last year. And some things that we make this year we didn't make last year. And maybe I make 1 million more bicycles, but 500,000 less computers, okay? So we can't count things in that sense. So we're going to have a measurement of quantity for the entire economy. What's our measurement of our entire economy's output? GDP. But we wanted inflation-adjusted GDP, not face value GDP. We're going to use real GDP, inflation-adjusted GDP, as our measurement of quantity, okay? All right, you guys? And we're going to still going to have a supply and demand curve, but it's going to be total supply of all goods and services throughout the economy, okay? And we're going to call that aggregate supply. Aggregate, when you aggregate, you sum up, you total up, you add up, okay? You add together. So to distinguish it between regular supply for a regular good, we're going to call it AS. And we have total demand throughout the entire economy for all goods and services now, not just demand for a single good. So we're going to distinguish that from demand for a single good by calling it aggregate demand, okay? Now, aggregate demand is the sum total of all of our purchases, okay, based on different price levels. Who purchases goods and services in the economy? We just went over this. Consumers, business, government, and foreigners, okay? So aggregate demand here is a function of spending by consumers, business, government, and foreigners on our GDP. All right, so far? Okay? Now, I got a little bit ahead, but I just wanted to show you this little model here so you at least have a somewhat familiarity with it, okay? This is aggregate supply in the short run. In the long run, long run aggregate supply, is a vertical curve, whereas short run aggregate supply is an upward sloping curve. Okay? Now, first thing is, this is the sum total of all market demand curves in the economy, right? That if costs are rising in general throughout the economy, supply is going to decrease throughout the entire economy, okay? That all goods are going to see a decrease in supply, and if we all get richer, we're all going to buy more stuff. Demand will shift out, okay? Right? So these curves represent total supply in the long run and in the short run. Now, why is there a difference between the long run and the short run? Okay? In the long run, real GDP has nothing to do with price. Okay? Remember our production possibilities curve here? Okay? Is price mentioned anywhere here? No. It's quantities of A's and quantities of B's if all resources are used efficiently. If we are out here, if we're supposed to be out there, supposed to be on the curve, okay? And we are using all available resources, no waste at all. If prices of goods go up, can we produce more? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the price level is here, here, or here in the long run. In the long run, we can achieve maximum possible production if all resources are being used efficiently, okay? We can achieve maximum possible production, and if prices go up, we can't, under normal circumstances, produce more, okay? So it doesn't really matter what happens to the price level. Here's another reason why, okay? This is long-run aggregate supply, okay? Think of the long run as the distant future, okay? And over the course of time, if nothing changes from this point on, and we don't know what's going to change, so we assume is not based, our picture of the future has to be based on conditions today, right? Our extrapolation of what's going to be out there is based on what we know about what's now, not what's going to happen if we don't know what's going to happen, okay? Does that make sense? So over the course of time, if nothing happens, if there's a surplus, if no changes are made, okay? If this market is in surplus, what's going to happen to the price? It's going to eventually go down, okay? And we'll be in equilibrium. No more surplus, right? Okay. If this is the labor market, over the course of time, if no changes are made, eventually we will go to this point. Is there any unemployment when we are in equilibrium? Remember, an unemployment of labor is a surplus of unemployment is a surplus of labor. So if the labor market adjusts so that we are in equilibrium at some price of labor, okay, is there any unemployment? No. If we are at full employment, where are we? We are out here on this curve. Okay. Does it matter if prices go up? No, we cannot produce more. So in the long run, over the course of time, if nothing changes, all markets for all goods will go to equilibrium, including the labor market. And once we are in equilibrium in the labor market, we are at full employment, we are out on the PPC, we are achieving maximum possible production, and it doesn't matter what happens to prices, we cannot produce more. In the long run, what we can produce is 100% depending upon resources and technology, okay? When we are maximizing our use of resources at the current level of technology, we are producing the maximum possible amount, and it doesn't matter whether prices go up or down, okay? Now, what happens if I get more resources? What will happen to my PPC? It will shift out. If I get more resources, can I produce more in the long run? Or if I get an advance in technology, can I produce more in the long run? Absolutely. The long run aggregate supply curve will shift out, okay? That's economic growth. Same thing. This is just the same representation in a different form. All right, so far? Okay. So, what we say is that long-run aggregate supply represents the most efficient output of the nation under conditions of full employment, okay? It is the full employment level of real GDP, okay? After all adjustments have been made in the economy, and we are at maximum usage of labor, we can achieve maximum possible production, and it doesn't matter what happens to the price level. We cannot produce more, okay? In the long run. As we're going to see, we can produce more in the short run, okay? All right. That's long-run aggregate supply. We also have aggregate demand, right? Total demand for all goods and services throughout the economy by consumers, business, government, and foreigners. Okay? We have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve. Remember, we have aggregated demand. We've summed up all demand curves for all goods. So this is just all demand curves represented as one. Anything that causes a normal product demand curve to shift, generally speaking, will shift this, with some exceptions, right? When we bundle all goods together, we can't talk about related goods anymore, okay? There's no substitutes or complements. Those are gone, right? But we can talk about things like incomes. If we all are earning more money, what happens to demand curves? They shift out. This will do the same thing. If we all get a big increase in pay, aggregate demand, all demand for all goods and services will shift out. If we become worried about the future, do we buy more or less steak? Less. If we become worried about the future, we buy less of all things. Aggregate demand will shift in, okay? If we think the future is going to be wonderful, we're all going to get a big raise, we go out and we buy more now, okay? It shifts out. I know I do. Okay? All right. So aggregate demand is just like the sum total of all demand curves, and it's a function of spending by consumers, business, government, and net exports, okay? Anything that causes us at every possible price level to spend more money will shift the aggregate demand curve out. What would do that? Well, there's lots of things. We could all get richer, right? We all get a big increase in pay. We're all earning more money. We buy more of everything. Aggregate demand shifts out. If government cuts our taxes, we all have more money to spend. We buy more of everything. Aggregate demand shifts out. If the value of the dollar changes so that our goods become cheaper, instead of $1 equaling 2 foreign currency, okay, it goes to $1 now only equals 1 foreign currency, what's going to happen to exports? They're going to increase. In the past, for a foreigner to get $1 worth of goods, it took 2 units of their currency. Now, thanks to changes in the value of the good, of money, it now only takes 1, half as much. We'll sell more, okay? At every possible price level, aggregate demand will shift out. Okay with that? Now, what happens when price level changes? Well, it's the same thing on any other demand curve, right? Price is down. I don't know why I did a new one. Okay? When the price level is here, remember this is real GDP, that's how much of our real GDP we'll buy. Okay? But if the price level rises up to here, we'll consume less of our real GDP. Okay? Real GDP will fall. Now, I don't like the way this book talks about it. Okay? The book makes it sound like real GDP is dependent upon our spending. It really isn't. It depends upon our production. But we're going to go with this take on it, all right, you guys? That real GDP depends upon our spending. And how much we consume depends upon the price level. As we get more and more inflation, we buy less and less stuff for 3 reasons. Okay? The aggregate demand curve is downward sloping because it shows that there's a relationship between the price level, inflation, and real GDP. That as prices rise, we buy less. Real GDP falls. Okay? Now, the first obvious reason is as prices go up, our cash buys less, right? Same amount of money buys fewer goods if their prices rise. That if things are if I have $100 and things are $10, I can buy 10. But if the price rises to $12, now I can only buy 8. Okay? This is called the real balance effect. Our cash balances, our money buys less when prices go up. That's one reason why GDP goes down when the price level rises. That's a direct effect. My $100 take home every week buys less goods because their prices went up. Okay? Now, it also will have an indirect effect. Let's say that you worked all summer long planning to pay for your next year at Bunker Hill. Okay? And you saved enough money. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that each semester costs $2,000, okay? So you saved up $4,000, and that's what you expected you'd have to pay for the coming 2 semesters. But over the course of the summer and into the fall, we get a lot of inflation, so that the costs of cleaning materials, the cost of electricity, the costs of desks and chairs are all going up. Is the college just going to eat that additional expense? Oh, no. Who's going to pay? You. All right? So let's say that $2,000 was enough for the spring, but you need now for the fall, but now you need $2,500. You are short $500. Okay? Because of inflation, prices went up. Now your cash is insufficient to pay for what you intended to pay for, to buy what you intended to buy. You're still going to come to school. Where are you going to get the other money? No. You can't work. You're a student. You're a full-time student. Yeah, borrow money. Okay? Borrow money. If inflation causes prices to rise, and now some of us no longer have enough money to buy the things that we still need to buy, in order to make up the difference, we will go out and borrow it. Okay? We will go out and borrow it. So, in the market for money, interest rates are the price of money. Okay? If all of a sudden lots of us find out that we don't have enough money to pay for the things we intended to pay for, and we now have to borrow money, that's like an increase in the population of people in the market to borrow money. And what's going to happen to the demand curve? It's going to shift outwards. And what's going to happen to the price of money? It's going to rise. Interest rates will rise. Okay? Because of inflation, pricing us out of the, or causing us to have to borrow money to buy the things that we need to pay for now, increased demand to borrow money will cause interest rates to go up. Now, when interest rates rise, are you more or less likely to buy a new car? Less likely. Is business, now, business looks at the future, okay, and looks at opportunities to invest for a profit. So they will look. Let's say business looks and they have 3 potential projects, okay, and the profit margin on this one is 10%. And this one is 8%. And the profit margin on this one is 6%. Each one is $1 million project. Okay? If interest rates are below 6%, business is going to borrow $3 million and spend it in the economy. Okay? But if we cause interest rates to rise to 7%, because of inflation, we need to go borrow more money, now this project is no longer profitable. Business won't spend that other million. They'll only spend $2 million instead of $3 million, okay? Consumers will reduce their borrowing and spending, and business will reduce its investment if interest rates rise. And interest rates will rise if we don't have enough money to pay for the things that we need to pay for, have to go out and borrow it, okay? I mean, that's what I had to do every single year, is borrow money to pay for my kids' educations, right? Let's see, my son graduated in 2004, my daughter in 2003, and I still owe $40,000. Yeah, it's 40. My original debt was $120,000 I borrowed to put my kids through school. You wish I was your daddy. Okay? My dad paid for my education, so I figure if they get a good education, they'll support me in my old age. They might. I told you what my daughter was going to do for me, didn't I tell you that? Yeah. Yeah? She's going to buy me a house in Maine or Vermont to live in. Yeah, that's what she said. In 5 years, she's going to buy a house, a vacation house, for her and her husband in either Maine or Vermont, and my wife and I are going to go live in it and take care of it for her. Nice, huh? So I'm hoping. Exactly. We'll see. I'm staying on her good side. That's for sure. Okay? So far we have two effects. Okay? As the price level rises, real GDP falls because of a direct effect, the real balance effect. Our money won't go as far. Okay? And we have an indirect effect. It's called the interest rate effect. Bunch of us now, because we don't have enough money to pay for those things, go out and borrow money, and it causes the interest rates to go up. That's the interest rate effect. And finally, if our prices rise more than other countries' prices are rising, our exports are going to become more expensive relative to their goods, okay? So they will reduce their purchases. They'll reduce the quantity demanded of our goods as the prices of our goods rise. And as our goods become relatively more expensive, we buy more foreign goods. So we have what's called an open economy effect. Okay? Open economy effect. And it's called the open economy effect because it wouldn't affect you at all if you weren't trading with other countries. Wouldn't matter, right? If you're not exporting or importing, then it wouldn't matter. You have to have an open economy, open borders. And there are very few countries in the world that don't have an open border in terms of imports and exports, right? Okay? So there are three different effects. This is the reason why it is downward sloping, meaning that GDP goes down as the price level rises. Our cash doesn't buy as much anymore in the real sense, but we buy less. Because our cash won't go as far, we go out and borrow money, which causes interest rates to rise, which reduces consumer borrowing and spending, reduces business borrowing and investing. And as our prices rise, our goods become more expensive, exports fall, imports rise. Okay with that? Okay. Okay. Anything else in this chapter we need to talk about? They used to have 10 and 11 together. Shifts in the aggregate demand curve. I talked about that already, right? Yes?
Interest rate effect the only
Indirect effect, yeah. Okay. Now remember that aggregate demand is a function of consumption in business investment, government spending, and net exports. I already went over this really. Anything that causes at every possible price level causes us to spend more money, buy more goods, will shift the aggregate demand curve out. What could happen? We have more money to spend. Or government cuts our taxes. We have more money to spend because we could earn more money or we can get a cut in taxes that allows us to spend more of the income that we do have, right? If interest rates fall, no matter what the price level, business will invest more money. It'll shift out, okay? that doesn't make sense. Never mind. Skip that. Okay. Government decides they're just going to buy more goods and services. Okay. No matter what the price level, they increase their purchases, out it goes. Or if the value of the dollar changes so that our dollar becomes cheaper, okay, 200 pesos equals a dollar. Okay? If our goods become more expensive so that it costs 300 pesos to buy a dollar, then exports are going to buy a dollar's worth of whiskey, then exports of whiskey are going to fall. But what's going to happen to imports of tequila? But they're going to rise, because in the past, for our dollar, we only got 200 pesos worth of tequila. Now we get 300 pesos of tequila. Okay? You like tequila? There's a reason why they call it tequila. Okay? I like tequila. All right. What causes inflation? Well, there's two reasons where we can get inflation. We're going to put this long-run aggregate supply curve in now. Okay, LRAS. Okay. There's two reasons two ways to get why the price level could rise. The first is that increased spending, no matter what. We get a tax cut, we have more money to spend. No matter what the price level, we can buy more stuff. Aggregate demand now shifts out, okay? And in the long run, that will cause the price level to rise, okay? This is called demand pull inflation. Demand pull, caused by prices going up by increases in demand, right? We're richer, demand is shifting out for all goods, the prices of all goods are rising. Okay? Demand pull. Or, hey, what happened? What's that? Where'd that come from? Okay. Or, what else could happen? Oops. If long-run aggregate supply shifts out, oops, that's deflation, right? We might as well talk about it. If we get advances in technology or more resources, right, what becomes possible to produce increases. So if we get advances in technology or more resources, long-run aggregate supply will shift outwards and the price level will fall, okay? If we lose resources, what will happen? Long-run aggregate supply will shift in, okay? And we will get inflation that way. Doesn't happen, right? Well, actually, it could happen, right? What's going to happen when we start running out of oil if we haven't developed enough alternative fuels, right? Then supply would shift in. Okay? But hopefully that's not going to happen. Okay? No, I mean supply. Yes. That if oil runs out, then we won't be able to produce as much, right? Maybe? I don't know. Okay? Unless we have alternative measurements. So when aggregate demand shifts out, we'll get an increase in the price level. If aggregate supply shifts out, we'll get a decrease in the price level. It's called secular deflation. Okay? But inflation can occur because of increases in aggregate demand or decreases in supply. Both of these will cause the price level to rise. All right? Almost all inflation is due to demand. Okay? Demand. Talked about hyperinflation, countries that see very high levels of inflation. What causes that to happen? Do you know? Why do these countries see huge amounts of inflation? Because the government irresponsibly pumps tons and tons of money into the economy. Okay? They buy too much stuff. They print too much money. And so you end up with lots and lots of money increasing with relatively fewer goods increasing. So more money chasing fewer goods causes prices to rise. Okay? And why do they pump a bunch of money? Because the election's coming up next year, and we want to make sure everybody's working. We'll worry about the inflation later. We want to make everybody fat and happy. All right? So they'll elect us again. okay? So it's a social reason, really, or political reason why we get a lot of inflation. Okay? So supply side inflation, not usually. Demand side, yes. Okay? Demand side inflation. All right. Before I forget, I want to give you your homework for next Monday. Okay? And what? 16? Yes, the damn 16th edition. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right, your homework. And then I'm going to just give you a preview of the next chapter, all right? Because that's a complicated chapter. We need to look at it probably more than once. So first, we'll put up the homework, okay? 5-10. That's the only one in chapter 5. 6.2 and 6.4. 6.2 and 6.4. Seven dash 2, 7-8, 7.12, and 7.14. And then an 8. Oops, why isn't that working? 8-4. 8-8. -10. And 8.14. Okay? That's enough. Right? Too much. Oh, come on. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Yeah, you could do 11 problems. Okay? You have almost a week. I'm sorry? Oh, the 16th. See me come up after class, all right, and we'll I'll identify it for you. Unless you want to give me a copy of your book, and I'll put it up right now. Okay? And then what do you have? 15th? Huh? Yes. Yep. Half of 5, half of 6, and 7 and 8. Okay? All right, so let's see. Chapter 5. Now I need my glasses. 5:10. No. 5-8, yeah. Okay, 5-8. Chapter 6. Was that 6.2 and 6.4? Yeah, 6.2. No. I'd like you to do 6.1, but the answer's in the back, so there's not much point. You want to do 6.1? Nothing else in that chapter. Okay, 7. What did I say? 2.8. Yeah.
There's 6. They are the same ones, right? 6.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, no, I don't think so. I think there's only one, isn't there? Didn't I just tell you one? Only 6.2, yeah. The 6.4 is different in this book, so. 7-2. 7-4. 7-2, 7-4, 7-8, 7-10, 7-8 and 7-10. Okay. Oh, and 7-12 too. Do that one. That's easy. It's going to take. It's going to take a minute. And then an 8. 8-2. 8-6. 8-8. And 8-10. Yeah, and 8-10. Okay, that's enough. All right, thanks, Teddy. That's not too much. How many problems did I give you?
11.
Same as M. 11 problems. If you do 2 a day, you'll be all set. Okay. All right. One little bit more, and then we'll call it a day or week. All right. All right. Classical and Keynesian economics. All right. I'm gonna put up the classical model for you. Okay. All right. Okay. In our model of the entire economy. Okay. Now this is like I said, the classical model. This model was relevant from roughly from 1700s to early part of the 20th century. Okay, and the new model that we're going to look at is the model of the American economy. May not necessarily be applicable to other economies. Keynes's model was based on the fact that there was a fundamental change to the American economy in the early part of the 20th century. Okay, and we'll talk about that. But first, this classical model. Okay, we have real GDP here, and we have the price level here. Remember, this is our index. Okay, GDP deflator. It's going to drive me insane. But now it's above it instead of below it. Anyway, okay, so we got price level here. And real GDP here. We have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve, a function of spending by those 4 groups. We have a vertical, so far, long-run aggregate supply. Okay? Remember, what this shows is that in the long run, once all adjustments have been made, output depends upon full employment. Okay, it doesn't matter what the price level is. We can't increase output under normal circumstances once we're out here unless we get more resources or advance in technology, right? Okay? However, that's not the case in the short run. The short run aggregate supply curve in the classical model is an upward sloping curve. Okay? If we start here, this is the full employment level of real GDP. If we start here, and let's say that the economies of Western Europe, Japan, Australia, South America, whatever, begin to grow. Those people in these countries get richer. Not only will they buy more of their own goods, but they'll buy more of ours also. So net exports increase. At every possible price level, we are selling more. So aggregate demand now shifts out. Okay? This is full employment level of real GDP. Now what's happening when we move out here? Real GDP expands to here. Okay? How is it that we can now get out here? Remember, I said if we're at full employment, we're on the curve. Any GDP to the right is out here. We can't get there, can we? Sure we can. Okay? How can we produce more If we're already producing this amount of GDP at full employment, how can we produce more GDP? More than full employment. We go into overtime production, okay? When aggregate demand shifts out, what happens to the price level? The price level rises. The prices of all goods increase. But have the costs of manufacturing these goods increased? No. So when the price of these goods rises, but the cost remains the same, what happens to profits? They rise. Will manufacturers want to increase output? Yes, they will. But if we're already working full-time, we're already at full employment, the only way to produce more is to go into overtime production, okay? So now this represents overtime production, a greater GDP because we're working more hours. We're running machines instead of 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day, okay? All right so far? Okay. So when aggregate demand shifts out, manufacturers have an incentive to increase output because prices have risen but costs have remained the same. So they will offer workers overtime work, ask them to work on Saturdays or Sundays or 2 shifts, run machines more intensely. They can produce more, okay? Now what happens if aggregate demand keeps shifting out? Let's say here's our upward sloping supply curve. This gets more and more straight up, more and more vertical, more and more steep, okay? What that shows is that if aggregate demand shifts out from here to here, yes, output will increase, but the price level will also go up. But if aggregate demand shifts out from here to here, that's a terrible one. Okay. If it shifts from here to here, output can't increase. We're already producing maximum, but the price level will go up. All right? Why is that? How many hours can you actually work in a day? 24, okay? How many hours can you run machines in a day? 24. So even if demand increases, once we are working maximum amount and machines are being run 24 hours a day, no matter what happens to prices, we can't produce more, right? We're already at maximum theoretical. Everybody's working 7 days a week. Right? Did I tell you guys I work 24/7? Did I tell you that? Yeah. No, I work 24/7. 24 hours a week, 7 months of the year. That's about the size of it, too. I don't know if this is true or not, but my mother, I think my mother told me this story about my grandfather. He was a baker. He used to bake. He owned a bakery down on Cape Cod in Falmouth. And she told me that to get ready for the weekend, he would go in on Thursday morning, and he'd work all day Thursday, and then he'd work all Thursday night, getting, all baking stuff. And then he'd work all day Friday and all day Friday night. And then he would work all day Saturday also, okay? And then he would come home on Saturday evening, 5 o'clock, and my mother said he had to crawl up the stairs. He's so tired. And my grandmother would have a bathtub full of hot water for him, and he would crawl into the bathtub, and he would lie there and soak for an hour. Then he'd get dressed, get up, get dressed, and he'd go out and play poker all night. I was like, man, I'd like to met that guy. I never did meet him. Oh, well. All right. So there are limits to how much we can work. Now, when I'm going to go over this, of course, again, but when we are out here, let's say aggregate demand has shifted out, and we are out here at that GDP. Any GDP to the left, this is the full employment level of real GDP, okay? We're out here on the curve. Any GDP to the left or the right of full employment is a temporary situation. Adjustments will be made in the economy to bring us back to long-run equilibrium eventually, okay? So this didn't turn out too well. I'm just going to show you what's going to happen according to the classical economists. That if we start here in equilibrium, okay, we are here in equilibrium at the full employment level of real GDP, and aggregate demand shifts out, the price level will rise, profits will increase, manufacturers will want to increase output, okay? But what's going to happen next? GDP will expand beyond full employment. We'll be out here. This, by the way, is called an expansionary gap. The difference between what we are producing in overtime and what we would normally be producing under normal full employment conditions, okay? Now, what's going to happen now? Now more adjustments are going to be made in the economy, okay? You want to work, your boss wants you to work overtime, right? Okay. But so the guy across the street is also looking for labor, is he not? He wants more labor too, so he can produce more. In order to get more laborers to come and work for him, what's he going to do? Yeah, he's going to offer you more money, right? He's going to say, I'll offer more money to anybody who comes and works for me. So you find out the guy across the street's paying $2 more an hour. So what's the first thing you're going to do? You know, you're going to go to your boss and say, listen, boss, if you don't give me a raise, I'm going across the street where I'm going to get a raise, okay? So competition for workers, increased demand for workers is going to do what to labor rates? Demand shifts out, the price of labor is going to rise. What's going to happen in the raw materials area, in the resource area? We used to need, when we were producing, let's say that's raw materials, when we were producing that amount of goods, that's how much raw materials we were consuming. Now we want to produce more, then demand for raw materials is going to shift out. And the price of raw materials is going to rise. What's going to happen when costs now begin to rise? What happens in this market to the supply curve when costs increase? Profits decrease, supply curve shifts in, okay? So what's going to happen now to this supply curve if costs rise? It's going to shift in. And we're going to go from here to here, back to full employment equilibrium. And the only change in the long run, increase in the prices. First, because demand shifted out, and then the price level rose again when the supply curve shifted in because costs rise. Now we're going to go back to normal full employment. Huh? Yes. In fact, this is 2 hits of inflation. This was one of the points that the classical economists made, that increases in demand in the long run will not result in increased output. It'll only result in more inflation. When the demand curves shift out, we get what's called demand pull inflation. Okay? Prices going up by more and more people buying more and more stuff. And then when costs rise and the supply curve shifts back in and the price level rises again, we get what's called cost push inflation. Okay? So in this classical model, I'll show you the model again, except on this side too, not now, next time, okay? In this classical model, we always end up at normal full employment in the long run, okay? In the long run, adjustments are always made. If we're back here, we're at less than full employment, costs will fall because of the decrease in demand for goods and raw materials. The curve will shift back out again and we'll go back to full employment, okay? In the long run, we always end up on the long run full employment curve, okay? You know what Keynes said about the long run? You know, if you're unemployed, in the long run, you'll get your job back. Okay? Said, in the long run, we're all dead. Okay? We can't wait for the adjustments to be made. In this model, there's no role for the government. The economy is self-adjusting. It always goes back to normal full employment. If there's a surplus of labor, what's going to happen to the price of labor? It's going to fall, and we'll eliminate that surplus of labor. So in the long run, the economy is self-regulating, self-adjusting. And Keynes, there's no role for government. According to Keynes, though, in the long run, we'll be dead. We can't wait for the long run. We need government action today to give us our jobs back, okay? So Keynes was a big believer in government action, whereas the classical economists were laissez-faire. Keep your hands off. Adjustments will always be made to bring us back to normal employment, okay? So next time, We're going to go back over this model in its entirety, only did part of it, and we'll also begin to look at Keynes's model, okay, which is very much different than this one. All right, you guys?